Hello, everyone. This is W, host of the High Art on the Edge page. Today, I had the incredible privilege of speaking with the legendary British photographer Brian Griffin. He shared with us what life was like growing up in Birmingham, England, as well as the Black Country and how that environment inspired his work. He provided details about a club that he joined that became very pivotal and a catalyst for his career. Not to mention, he shared with us, as you will see, iconic images based on album covers and projects that he has put together and assembled over the years. Lastly, you will hear his passion for his latest Kickstarter campaign based on a series of photos he did for the band Depeche Mode from 1981 to 1986. Pull up a seat, sit back, relax, and enjoy my conversation with one of England's finest photographers, Brian Griffin. A little D mode for you all. Hello, everyone. My name is W, also known as William. Welcome to this very special event. I'm the host of High Art on the Edge. Today is going to be a fun-filled day as you will be educated and entertained as we have a very special guest with us, a world-renowned photographer. You may be familiar with his work as he has worked with Depeche Mode, Brian May, Peter Gabriel, Echo and the Bunnymen, REM, the list goes on and on. But he's also done some other amazing photographs that you will have a chance to take a look at, along with a brand new Kickstarter campaign. So excited to talk about that and how it's meeting its goal. Brian Griffin, how are you?
I am very well indeed.
Cheers. Thanks for being here.
Oh, it's a pleasure. Oh, I've got a glass of water. You've got a cup of coffee.
I do have my coffee. I'm so excited to have you here and dive into your work. And by the way, if you're tuning in, let us know where you're tuning in from. If you have a question for Brian, go ahead, throw it in there, and we will take these questions during our conversation. So, Brian,
Yeah.
um, I've got two words for you. I want to start this conversation with two words. Very simple. Black country. When you hear those two words, what comes to mind? Black country.
My early part of my life, which has been really important to my art, as you could say, the influence of the Black country.
The black country being known for steel, coal, industrial.
Yeah. It reminds me when I came to America, Pennsylvania, Allentown or whatever. Or it reminds me of Dresden, not Dresden, the Ruhr Valley in Germany, a big industrial, dark, black area. That was my early christening to this planet.
For people that aren't familiar with black country, where exactly is it?
It sits next to Birmingham. It's not Birmingham. Birmingham is not in the Black Country. Birmingham is a city unto itself. It's about 10 miles, 10, maybe 8 to 10 miles in height. And this is like on the map. And also probably 8 miles wide. And it's a very specific area. And you can tell a Black Country person because I could not speak English until I was well into my teens. I spoke in dialect, so until I was about maybe 15 years old before I could speak proper English or a form of English. Yeah.
And so, with you growing up in Birmingham, take us back to those times of through education. Did you enjoy your schooling back then? What kind of a student were you? How did you get into photography? So on and so forth.
Wow, that's quite a lot. Okay, one, I think I was a naughty boy at school, although I was studious. I was a good. I was in the lower. When I was in junior school, I was really at not the bottom of the class, but virtually towards the bottom. And I created a miracle. We had a thing called 11 plus examination, which could possibly take us to grammar school. And I passed that exam and went to a form of grammar school, a technical school, which we were talking earlier about Robert Plant. He went to grammar school in my area, and I went to technical school in my area. We'll just go very quickly. Then I had to, because parents wanted me to leave school and earn some money, and I left at 16, which was too young to leave. I could not, take what we call A levels in England, which would then take you on to onto university if you pass them. No, I left and went into a factory. I was in a factory watching the rats play next to the canal that ran next to the factory I worked in. And I became a photographer about 2 years later. About the age of 18, I joined a local camera club, one of those amateur affairs that we have around the world, where people meet once a week or go on trips together to click their expensive cameras. And I was working down on the floor of the factory, cutting, welding, all those basic jobs that you do in a factory that does cutting or welding of steel, that is. And the man who was next to me with a big, we call sledgehammers in England, or what you call them in America, a bit like the construction time again of Depeche Mode, like wielding that sledgehammer. As he spoke to me, he said, "Have you ever been interested in photography?" And I said, "No," which I wasn't. And he said, "Well, come round to the camera club. You might find it interesting." So I went round to the camera club, and I joined the camera club as a beginner. In fact, I've been in touch with them over the last maybe 4 or 5 years. And I said, I grew up in your camera club. I never had a reply. They don't give a damn about me back where I came from. Only a few people think of any interest in what I'm up to. They're into, I don't know, all sorts of things, going down the pub or whatever. I don't know what they're into over there. Go on.
Tell us a little bit about your relationship with your mom and your dad or siblings. Did either your parents support your love for photography in the early stages?
Yes, they did in the early stages. When I was still at work, I built a sort of a portable darkroom in my parents'. It's a really small 2-up, 2-down house. I mean, the working classes lived in really terraced houses in England, very Victorian, Edwardian streets, and they're very small rooms, and like 2-up, 2-down. I didn't have any brothers or sisters, by the way, and I took over the back room, which was like the more formal of the rooms, very small rooms, as my dark room, Yeah. And they supported me then, but when I said I wanted to go and do photography, they didn't support that very well at all. They took that really harshly.
Why?
They thought, well, I was in a good job. I mean, I graduated then at the age of 21 to be a pipework engineering estimator in nuclear power station pipework, steam pipework, things like that. I had a job that I would have a job for life, and they recognized that. I was a white collar worker. I'd come out of working in a factory to be a white collar worker, meaning that you had an office job. It was like I'd come home as clean as I went, basically. Whilst my dad would come home covered in absolute dreadful, which killed him in the end. And he was a machinist, and my mother worked in the factory as well. She was just bagging nails, just bagging nails. And my father was a horizontal borer in the factory. So, they had dreadful jobs whilst I came back. They probably admired me because I came back immaculate as when I went, which I dressed in a suit, tie, and and shirt, white shirt. We dressed very formally in those days. We didn't go all sort of, I don't know, casual to
So
officers.
thank you for sharing that. And so we know your images have been directly connected to iconic album covers and really important bands and artists.
Yeah.
When you were exploring photography in the early stages, did music play a role in the inspiration of capturing images?
Yeah, I mean, I had a discotheque one day a week. My friend John Crampton and myself, we had a discotheque in a pub about 7 or 8 miles away from our homes. Excuse me, I can't stand my H's. And we did on a Wednesday night. In fact, this is interesting. When Robert Plant actually went on tour with Led Zeppelin, his wife came to our discotheque, so she must have thought it was an interesting discotheque. We were playing what you could call, like, we played everybody from the Groundhogs to I need to think of somebody else. Loads of bands in the 70s. We played, obviously Bob Dylan. Obviously, we played Leonard Cohen, and we played Hendrix, of course, and like all those progressive bands of the late 60s. We had a great discotheque, really basic amplification, really like the cheapest possible, coming through one speaker. And the guy who took the money on at the door. I think it was probably about a shilling or 2 shillings, which is 5p or 10p to get in. And there was a bar in there as well, because it was in a pub. And we drank the money away, actually. We drank all the attendance money away in those days. Well, he certainly did, on the door. I couldn't drink it all the way because I had a car to drive the gear back home, Yeah. So yeah, I grew up with music, and the area I grew up in was extremely musical in a strange way, because as I was talking earlier, I do like electronic music, and the sounds of all the factories around me. You had the tapping of the bath and bucket works, doo, 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 doo. And then you had the forges that come down, boha, boha. And then you had the steel rolling mills where they're rolling all the steel. And there were all these sounds, both that I remember in my childhood. A cacophony was happening around where I lived in the Black Country. And I fell in love with that again, actually, in the 80s especially, and in the 90s definitely.
So you like those textures?
Yeah, I do. Yeah,
those aural textures.
Yeah,
and Birmingham, hosts obviously historical bands that we were talking about earlier: Led Zeppelin, Judas Priest, Duran Duran. So at that time, when you were becoming a photographer, was there an image or two that really inspired you to be like, yeah, that's kind of what I want to do?
Well, sorry, it's rather deflating what I'm going to say, in the sense that I thought that I could do something in the music industry, and I wanted to develop. By this time, we were talking about late 70s, and I wanted to do album sleeves. So I went round to one of the major record labels at the time, an independent label called Stiff Records, and I got a job straight away. I just took my folio in. They loved my portfolio of other things apart from music, as you kindly said earlier. And they loved my work. So I got Graham Parker's Parkerilla. That was the first album cover I did. And then after I'd done that, I worked with Lena Lovitch quite a bit. I really thought Lena Lovitch was amazing artist. Yeah. And I'm sorry to have lost her in the end. Lost her in the sense that the record company didn't want to work with her anymore. So they thought my work was too arty. But anyway, yeah, that's what started me off. But Elvis, I thought Elvis was Stiff Records at the time, but he'd left Stiff and he went to Radar Records, which is a Warner Brothers label in the late 70s. He left Stiff, although he was on Stiff initially. And I worked with Elvis as well. A few covers for Elvis I did all the way through the 70s and the 80s. Anyway, I'll wrap it.
But why did you want to get into album art covers?
Because I wanted to increase my income, I think. I wanted to increase my output in photography, and I wanted to increase my income as a professional photographer.
And that was the means to that at that time. That seems to be the lucrative job for up-and-coming photographers.
Absolutely.
Okay.
I mean, I had quite a good portfolio by then.
Yeah.
Because you're interested in the 70s in my work, and I had a weird portfolio. I was like nobody else, really. I don't know. I mean, as I said to you earlier, I think something came from growing up in the Black country, left me with images that were indelible, that were implanted in my brain that I could not rid of, and they just stated and became part of my inspirations, really.
And I understand you're a big fan of surrealism, Renaissance work. Is that correct?
That's correct. I mean, of course, I was very fond of, and still am very fond of surrealism. I would go, like, when it became the 80s, for instance, I would go and stay in a hotel right next to Dali's house. So I thought I could see Dali in the garden or whatever. I was really, really thought of surrealism. Although people sort of thought of me as a surrealist, they labelled me as a surrealist, so I sort of adopted it in a funny sort of way. I took their lead, really, the onlookers or the people that saw my work. Most definitely, yeah.
When did you start feeling like you were establishing yourself as a name?
Ooh. A very interesting question. I think it took me a long time. I think the 80s really started to do that. And they started to grow so considerably, my fame and fortune in the 80s. Like that, I was almost like a rock star in a sense. I adopted almost a rock star's lifestyle, or the bad side of a rock star's lifestyle. It just got to such an extent, my fame in the 80s, that, I left photography for 12 years after that. I just wanted to carry on doing film instead of photography. I thought I'd done everything in photography. That was very naive of me, of course.
So how did you handle that meteoric rise to fame?
Badly,
yeah. Stuff we can't talk about.
I'm sorry?
Stuff we can't talk about right now.
Yeah, that sort of stuff. I had a studio down in Rotherhithe in the 80s, which is where I live now still. Been down here 42 years in this area. So it's on the southeast side of London, right dead central, really, quite near Tower Bridge, if you want a sort of a geographical position of it. So it's not out of town, really. It's right in there. I just lost it somehow. My life just. I realised I was losing it a bit. I had felt a lot of anxiety through the 80s. I overworked. I'm a workaholic. Still am a workaholic, 7 days a week, and it really overtook me until I started to get affected by it. Really, both in terms of lifestyle and in terms of health. I think not that I had any bad issues of health. I just sort of had anyway.
Do you remember what elevated you out of that kind of cavernous, dark times in your life? Was it a friend? Was it just you kind of hit rock bottom and you said you had enough? What was the catalyst for that change?
I thought it's because if I tell you, it's a really horrible, probably a lot of people won't like what I say. I became so famous that I thought I could become a top movie director. And that's what changed me in 1991. I'd done a big commercial, a series of 3 commercials in 1989 as just a side thing I did through the year. but then I adopted it as my main form of income. Would not do photography at all. I locked all my cameras away into a steel cabinet and did not open that cabinet for a number of years, really.
What film directors inspired you? Were you or are you a Lynch fan? Were you a
Of
Charlie
course,
Chaplin?
you know I am. I mean, I'm a Lynch fan. David and I started doing the same sort of things way back in the 70s when he brought out Eraserhead. I mean, Eraserhead was sort of hit me right in the solar plexus in a way. I mean, I was right there.
That
It
is
was
so
like as if he was a clone of, I was a clone of him or he was a clone of me.
uh-huh.
And I love, I mean, as you know, we were going to go on and talk about that. Only When I Lose Myself by Depeche Mode is a very, very dark film. And you can see the influences of, or his influences on me or my influences on him in that film. I don't know if he even knows I exist, actually. Maybe he doesn't. I don't know.
Were you a fan of Charlie Chaplin and his kind of examination of the working man?
I like Chaplin's work. I like Keaton's work, but I really like Tati, the French film director. He was my favorite. Tati
Okay.
at the time I was making films, but at the time when I wasn't making films, and the influences of filmmaking or of film directors or of films on my work was more in terms of the German silent cinema of the, around about 1920, the late teens, the early 20s. Whether it was M for Murder or whether it was Metropolis or whether it was Pabst, Murnau or Lang. I mean, I loved all that period. That influenced my black and white film work. But then I started to get strongly influenced as I moved through the 70s into the late 70s into film noir. I absolutely loved film noir and the American side of the B movies, film noir. I mean, and then I remember Martin Parr has always been a great friend of mine, and I admire him tremendously. Great photographer. Me and him were so influenced by a book called Evidence that came out in America in 76? I'm taking that from memory. Book called Evidence by Mike Mandel and Larry Salton.
Okay.
I remember that. I met Mike Mandel. He came to England, actually, to a festival that I was part of. But anyway, that was a great influence. That had really a major effect on me. And I love Diane Keaton's photo books. I just want to get that in. I think she's produced some great photography books, rather.
Just on a side note, since we're talking about directors, people that are into photography as well, Jeff Bridges, the iconic actor, has done some wonderful photography. He's taken photos of when he's on the set, and he captured. Yeah, you should. It's really good stuff. Okay, so you climb out of that dark hole. You're into film noir. What is it about film noir that gravitates towards you? Like, why do you really absorb it?
Well, I think primarily it's because the Black country looked like that back then. It was like me. I was going home and watching like the film noir. I was watching the actions happening in the back streets or the side streets or the high streets or in my home or whatever. It was of that quality, that black and white shadowy world of film noir. I love it, and that hard, the hard light that's coming from the molten steel and putting dark shadows on the walls, or and I used to peer into the steelworks, and I worked in the steelworks as a student. Like, for instance, Some Great Reward, a Depeche Mode album cover I did, was the steelworks I worked in during my holidays in the holidays of being at university. Well, it's not uni; it was art college then. Art college, yeah.
And when was that shot? 83, 84?
When was it shot? Was it 84? I'm terrible at that, but
yeah. Someone
my home used to look after my home used to look upon that steelworks, although that steelworks was about a mile and a half, 2 miles, English miles away. And it would light the sky when they let the furnaces off. All the sky would be a glowing red. And it sat like a big ocean liner on top of a hill, massive steelworks. And it governed the whole area in terms of its, I don't know, its light on the weekends when they let the furnaces off. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah.
So I'm just going to take a little pause here and recognize some people. My name is W, also known as William, host of the High Art on the Edge page. I'm here speaking with legendary photographer Brian Griffin. We have some friends tuning in from London. Eva, thank you.
Eva, I know Eva. Say hello from me, yeah.
Simon as well. Tina from Cologne. Frank.
I know Tina very well. Hi, Tina.
From Brearley Hill. I'm not sure where that is.
Frank, yeah, Frank. He lives quite near the steelworks. We've just been talking.
Okay. Peter Marshall says hello, and Eleanor.
Yeah.
So actually, Simon has a question for you. And
Simon Helm. Is it Simon Helm?
Yes, it is Simon Helm.
Yeah, great.
His question is, and we're going to get in. I was just actually going to start moving into your actual technical equipment. Which lenses have served best when shooting portraits?
This is a very interesting question, actually, because you're not going to believe this. Well, you might believe it. I only ever used one lens in all my photography. All my photography in the album cover times was done with the 150 millimeter lens on the Hasselblad camera, which is a 6x6 centimeter, obviously, format. And then since I've inherited digital cameras, I started with a Mamiya camera, which then was bought by Phase One. I've always used a Mamiya zoom lens, which is a 70 to 200 millimeter zoom lens. That's all I've ever used in all my career, with occasional, very, very isolated use of a 50 millimeter standard lens or 85 millimeter on the Hasselblad, or I think, what is it? Is it 80 millimeter on the Phase One? I think it's 80. I think so. So I've only ever used two to three lenses in all my career, of which one is obviously a zoom, because it's 70 to 200. It's a zoom. I love telephoto lenses. I've photographed almost everything I've ever photographed, which gives me my feel, because I like to compress perspective, which the telephoto lens does, and it also produces, well, going back to surrealism, our discussion on surrealism, is the you bring two separate elements, which the surrealists did, but a juxtaposition of elements, and you can compress them and unite them together a lot better with a telephoto lens. But obviously, you want me to carry on about the technical side of it?
Well, so what I was thinking is, when we start looking at some of your photos, your projects, maybe you can share a little bit more in detail, if you don't mind. But how important is clarity or sharpness to you?
Immense. I'm really into sharpness. I'm almost like I'm a real geek when it comes to sharpness, and it's great, obviously, with these days being piped from my computer, my camera to my computer. One can check on sharpness and things, and that involves quite a few things, which I was going to discuss before we broke away into sharpness. Was one, you need a tremendous amount of light to bring in two objects which are separated from each other. You need a lot of power. And if you're going to use a small f-stop, I call it small because the hole's small, but some people say a large or whatever. In other words, like f16 or f11 or something like that, you need a lot of power to pump into this object, That is the downfall of that way of working, to get sharpness in two elements that are separate from each other. But as far as, say, photographing a face or something like that, I'm really into maximum sharpness. So therefore, I always shoot on these days, anyways, on a 6x6 on a medium format camera. I like to get a little better quality than a DSLR generally.
As you are learning all this as you go, is there a teacher, a mentor that really provided a lot of insight into the world of photography that you feel like you owe a bit of gratitude towards?
I owe gratitude towards my assistants who have had an additive effect upon everything we've photographed. Well, not everything, but a lot of times we've done different photographs. I mean, they are really helpful. I've never had anybody to teach me anything in all my career. I've had to teach myself. Like when I left art college as a photography student of 3 years, I'd studied art college. I had to start again, really, from basics. I didn't know anything when I was at art college. Nothing at all. I just left and had to learn everything again. Or I didn't learn anything there, so I had to learn everything about photography.
Is there such a thing as a mistake in photography?
Mistakes are fantastic. I love mistakes. Some of the best photographs I've ever taken are due to mistakes. They really are great mistakes. I love it when they happen. Oh, they're just wonderful. They can be absolutely marvelous things.
If you're tuning in, pay attention to that, and I think that's a great something. I feel sometimes maybe artists get so caught up in maybe trying to perfect things a little too much. I'm not sure. I don't live in that world of photography, but I've spoken to a lot of artists, particularly in music, and they're very particular in sound and how things are engineered, so on and so forth. So I'm glad to hear that. Shall we take a look at some of your work?
If you want to. You don't have to, but you can have a look if you want.
I think I want to.
Okay.
All right. Now, everyone, we are in the classroom with our student, Brian Griffin, who's going to share some of his work and talk about it. And if you have any questions, go ahead, put them in the comment box. We have Thomas here from Tomas from Sweden, Eva, Sharon, all the way from Israel, and Eleanor Thorne. Do you know Eleanor Thorne?
I do.
Okay.
Well, Helen is just up the street. What a wonderful lady. She's a wonderful lady. She's a Rotherhithe lady, and I often see her in cycling or in the street and say hello. She's a very highly educated, wonderful lady, yeah.
She says, I'm a neighbor living where Brian had his first studio on this street.
She lives in my studio, above my old studio. It doesn't exist anymore. It's a block of flats, and she lives above it.
Why I'm getting this all ready, can you quickly tell us how has this Black country changed in its appearance?
It's totally different. There's no big heavy engineering anymore. I mean, England, I mean, it's the workshop of the world, the Black country was, and there's none of that left, hardly any of it left. It's all small industrial parks, a bit like the outskirts of LA, really. Just small companies operating in massive industrial parks of small companies, and no longer is it like big factories belching out smoke and making incredible noises. For now, it's just all very small. Now it's different.
Are you ready to share?
I'm ready. I'm ready to rock.
Here we go. So right now, everyone, we're going to take a look at some of Brian's projects.
So and I can share, yeah?
On his website.
Yeah.
Yeah. Can you see this, Brian?
I can, absolutely. Okay.
We're going to start with the big tie here. And I want to go to...
That's in that's Entree Mochens.
So
you're up there, yeah.
There we go. Okay.
There we go, yeah.
Let's start with number one here. One day, a sales executive lent into the model of Broadgate. So the big tie. Go ahead and let us know some of the details going on here.
Well, this was a big brochure that was was made on the Broadgate. Broadgate, it was a big property development in the City of London near Liverpool Street Station, and they wanted to do a brochure on building Broadgate, basically, and on the ice rink in Broadgate. There was a central ice rink at one time, a round circular space within the property development that sat in the middle of the whole development. And I got to think of an idea how to show what was happening with the development at that time, show the model of the future when it's finished of that development, and show the ice rink. I had to think of an idea to unite all those places. So I went away and did probably a big walk, and obviously stared at the ceiling in bed a few nights, and came up with an idea where I'd photographed two men around a model, actually, for a corporate job a few months ago, prior to this photographic session. And they'd leant into the model for some reason to view it or whatever, and their tie had fallen in the model. And I remembered that their tie is falling in the model. So I went and proposed this idea for this brochure, which is a big publication, beautiful designed by Peter Davenport and Associates, Peter Davenport Associates, with a design group involved with it. And so therefore we got a spotted tie for the so-called executive, probably just a model, an extra, whatever. And he leant into the model, and I photographed him leaning into the model.
Yeah. No, and then we're going to move from that image to, we're going to go to number 6 here.
Okay.
Which really caught my attention.
There's the ice rink.
Here it is.
Yeah, then what happened, you see, was that we made 2 ties. One tie was 6 feet by 2 feet, which this is the tie.
Yeah.
And another tie was 40 feet. You're American, so you can understand what feet and inches. 40 feet long by 20 feet wide. It came in its own truck. With this, what I decided to do was do the whole series in black and white.
Okay.
Because black and white would hide, can we say, hide all the details in these make-believe ties or whatever.
Right.
And I shot it against the light as well, mostly against the light, and put a little bit of light back into the tie. I was trying to hide a lot of things, really, and this is just a small tie hanging by a lighting boom in front of the camera, and fairly near the camera. I mean, probably only 6 feet away or 8 feet away. And then, of course, that was a far distant building. None of this is Photoshop. It's all analog. It's all done for real. Every picture is a real photograph. It's not played with. Photoshop was not invented then. Well, the military might have had it, but we never had it.
Were you making a statement here of the working man in corporate?
The working man, yeah. I start to build up, the working man, because we haven't got it on there, but eventually it ended up in National Portrait Gallery. The banners hanging down in Trafalgar Square near Nelson's Column in London had the image of that man that is pointing at that work there, that still working man.
Yeah.
It had him. He's there at a distance in this picture. And my name and everything, whatever. It was a show at the National Portrait Gallery. Yeah.
Great motif of your work. Okay, so we're going to go from the big tie to the
black. You're not doing any more? Oh, right.
We can do...
Can you do one of the end shots to show, like, because I lit the whole... there's the tie hanging, the 6-foot tie again hanging over the top of the Liverpool Street Station. I'll go really quickly. You go to number 11 or 12?
Sure.
Yeah. So it came down in reality, as you can see. The big tie came down. We're going up with some. It fell down over all the traffic in in Bishopsgate. There it falls over the traffic. And that is the big tie. That is the 20-foot by, 60 or 80 foot tie. There they're carrying it as a, like, past all how they progress with the building, and then you're going to go to number 11 or 12, whatever.
Yeah.
And there he grabs his ice skates. There's the
There's the
executive upstairs, and he goes downstairs to the. Anyway, we've obviously edited it. You go down. I'm getting all excited about this. And then he skates on the outside. When those are all photographic students, and his big tie, the one I told you about, 20 foot by 60 foot, is actually put on the steps of the ice rink. And the executive that was upstairs with his big tie has come down because he's lost his tie. His tie is those steps, as you can see. And he's got a guard of honor of photographic students. As he skates on the new outdoor ice rink in Broadgate, yeah.
How do you remember how long that took?
A week shoot, I think.
Okay.
Lit all that side of Broadgate. That was one time I had to do a big lighting shot. Not the biggest, but one of the shots I did. I lit Broadgate 5 times, I think, or something. Massive area. That's a small area of probably 100 meters by 150 meters, you know?
Yeah. And I love the spotlight right here.
Yeah.
Creating these shadows here and the almost triangular formation. Now, that's fantastic. Shall we move on to Black Kingdom?
Yeah, sure, yeah.
All right. We're going to look at number 13.
Okay.
By the way, you can do this at home, everyone. His website is filled with all these projects and great images. So as I'm scrolling to number 13, what was the idea, the notion behind Black Kingdom?
It was financed by France, actually, by a Parisian ecological college. And I said I want to do a project on the Black Country, so I've never photographed my home. And they thought it was a marvelous idea, but the problem was they didn't understand what the Black Kingdom meant. Probably meant black people or something. I don't know what they felt the Black Kingdom was.
Yeah.
And we did a book. I'm just gonna. I don't know if you want to see this. This is the book, The Black Kingdom. If you want it, just contact me on my website. Not my website. Contact me, Brian at briangriffin.co.uk, and you can find a copy of it by talking to me, and I'll mail it to anybody who needs it. This is The Black Kingdom. Is that okay for me to show the book? Yeah?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Share what you want. So this image, Water from Heaven.
Yeah.
What's going on here?
I don't know. Okay. I really like this picture I did. It's just my assistant and his heart and his hands, you know. I'm a bit of a religious freak, really, as well. I don't know I'm a freak. I'm just believe in things. I love religion. Sorry, I don't like to put it, really. I'm just into. I believe somebody, you know, looks after me or something. I think because I've been looked after for most of my life, really, by something that I don't know where it exists or what. I'm so happy about my life. So happy about most of it.
Yeah.
Obviously, I've experienced bad things and good things, and horrible things and good things. But I like life, you know. And this is about life, really. It's the stuff of life. Sorry.
Where was this shot?
I have no idea actually, because it's quite a, you know, my career is so massive.
Yeah.
And I'm getting so old, I can't remember things. Yeah.
Number.
I like it myself, actually. By the way, that's a good choice.
Okay. Yeah. No, that one resonated with me. Number 15. It is my mother.
Well, my mother was dead, unfortunately, when I did this project in 2010, and my mother had died in 2008. And I wanted my mother in this project, which is about me going back to my home and that. And I had to find a woman that existed that looked like my mother at 30 years old. So I used a film casting lady that someone recommended me, and she found a woman that lived about 80 miles out of London in a place called Leamington Spa. And she came down and Roger Burton styled her, and Liz Daxar did her hair and did her makeup. And I got some to be oil, because my mother worked in a factory, as I mentioned earlier.
Right.
To represent a working woman, awful to work in the factory and with all that detritus hanging from you. And it was like a syrup, it was just a molasses or something like that. It's just like syrup, really. Golden syrup type of thing. I don't know exactly what it was.
Were you close to your mom?
I was, of course. All men are close to their mother. Mm-hmm. All women are close to their fathers, mostly. Mm-hmm. And I was close to my mother. Yeah.
What did she instill in you?
What did she instill in me?
A good work ethic?
I think she instilled in me, both my parents instilled in me a good work ethic. They were both workaholics. They both worked incredibly hard at home and at work. They worked 7 days a week, my dad did. And my dad went to the pub every night, of course. And but my mother stayed at home, probably watched television most of the time. And they worked so hard at the home and out in the garden. They had massive gardens. They were both avid gardeners. They had animals, loads of animals, as well as working in the factory. Yeah. Immense and hard-working people they were. So I followed them, really. That's all I do, is just work all the time, I think.
Yeah. That's a very striking image. All right, so we're going to go from 15 to this next one. This will be number 19. The Woman Chainmaker.
Yeah. She's an extraordinary woman. That was in a chain making factory. Her now husband was one of the directors, or was the son of the owner of that chain making factory. It's an area called Cradley Heath and Cradley. Okay. They made the chain for the famous Titanic.
Yes.
Titanic. And it's an area of chain which is basically died out now in the area. It's just a little bit remaining. And
so the anchors and chains were manufactured there.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the Titanic's anchor was manufactured there. Massive thing drawn by, I don't know how many horses it took to take it from the factory to the train station. I have no idea. There's loads of horses.
So I have to ask you about this image right here. So we're getting her stare. When you set these up, how do you get the participant to relax into what you want them to capture through that lens? Do you do rehearsals? Do you give us that process?
Maybe I'm an hypnotist. I don't maybe I don't know what I possess. I mean, I've obviously got a character that makes people feel confident and in my presence, my intimate presence. Because a portraiture is, you're only like 8 to 10 feet away from the subject, or even less. Sometimes 2 feet, 3 feet. I think, I don't know, it's just my character. I think it's what I'm made of. I think the way I'm so determined in a photographic session. I'm so involved in it. I'm really intensely involved in trying my best to get the best image possible from what I'm confronted with. And I think this rubs off on my subjects.
Yeah.
I'm not laissez-faire in any sense of the word. I'm really, really focused and concentrating all my maximum effort. And I sort of, sometimes it takes me a long time maybe an hour, which I can regard as a long time. Yeah, I mean, it's just my intensity. I think the way I am as a person.
When I first saw this image, it took me directly to Steven Spielberg's movie Schindler's List.
Oh, right, yeah.
Of the scene where they're in the ghetto and the little girl's walking across
Right.
the beaten grounds,
Right.
and everyone else is in, that kind of silvery black and white, and then she's in a red coat, I believe.
Right.
And so I'm not saying you were going after the same thing, but it just struck me in that manner. So with the idea with her hair, was that something you already had kind of envisioned, or you took the photograph and then you thought, okay, what am I going to play around with?
No, I mean, it was the stylist again, who's played a major part of my career over the last many number of years, is Roger Burton, a stylist who lives in London, operates the Horse Hospital as an artistic venue, operates Contemporary Wardrobe as a clothes hire place. He has been a major influence on a few aspects, like her hair. And Liz Daxauer was an incredible hairstylist. And Roger, coupled with Liz Daxauer, they could come up with like amazing ideas, and they thought of that hairstyle. I just readily accept what they come up with because I respect them so much. And
Right.
Yeah, they developed that hairstyle.
It's a wonderful image. All right, let's look at a couple more projects if you don't mind.
Not at all.
My name is W, host of the High Art on the Edge page, speaking with the wonderful photographer Brian Griffin. We're looking at some of his projects. Shall we take a look at? Would you like to look at early 70s?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'll try and remember. 50 years ago. I'll try and remember.
So out of these 19 images, number 3, here it is. There's something about this image that struck me, and I think it's this universal feel to it. I know, well, I don't know exactly what you were going for, but I have this feeling like this seems to me like this could be shot almost in my neighborhood or a neighborhood in Oklahoma. So tell us a little bit about this one.
This was a new town that was going to be built in the early 70s. There were new towns springing up really around Britain. And this was Milton Keynes, which is in the sort of center of the country. It's like about 50 miles out of London, going sort of northwestish. And this was just a simple shot of people living in this new town that was just being newly built. It's probably a slum now. I don't know, but it was newly built then.
What is this child doing? Do you see that?
I have no idea. It's a water pistol.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
I can't see it there, but
Okay. And then we're going to look at number 5.
Right.
This is the rush hour London Bridge. And if I'm not mistaken, this is one of, I mean, you have a lot of iconic photos, but this one, I think people really, really appreciate. Is that correct?
Oh, yeah. I mean, that just freaked me out when I took that. I mean, I'd only been like a year, less than a year out of art college when I took that. And of course, I've been watching Metropolis too much lately. And 2, it's people going to work into the city of London. And 3, Fritz Lang was obviously, and we were talking about shadows and we were talking about strong light and that. And with like the German expressionist filmmaking, a little bit into that area. But how I took that, I just got a taxi to drive me across the bridge slowly, and I would take pictures through the rear window of the cab of people coming to work in London. It was It was an editorial project for a magazine called Management Today,
Okay.
where I'd got to photograph people commuting into London, which was 1 million a day or 2 million a day. And I just traveled by taxi, traveled by tube, traveled by bus, from the position of the people that were traveling themselves. So that's how I approached that job. Yeah,
I love that you captured almost the spine of the seats here, right?
yeah. And the
Along
rails, yeah.
with the rails.
I just could not believe when I'd taken that. I believed I could be a photographer. It'd taken a long time. I had not got the self-confidence at all. I mean, I sort of badgered my way through photography college, blundered my way through being an amateur photographer, but I didn't really, really know if I could really be any good at it. But
So
that's what I've got to do. I've got to prove myself and I've got to make a go of it. But when I took that, I knew I could do it. It was such a relief, great relief.
did you know at that moment, if you can remember at that moment, oh my goodness, I've got it right here.
I knew it at that moment.
Yeah.
I almost like I was all my body was like full of like some energy, I
Yeah.
don't know why it's incomprehensible. Uh, like it was on fire. I was on fire after I'd taken that image. I was
Uh,
literally burning all over with
no.
with excitement, I think, and relief. A combination of relief and excitement.
So what is rush hour now like?
I think across that bridge is probably the same.
Yeah.
Although the people, I mourn the fact that people don't look. They look so messy today. We all look so messy today. They all look so regimental in those days.
Yeah. No, that's a great one. All right. So we go from one of your favorites, Rush Hour, London Bridge, and we're going to go move to number 12. Thank you for hanging in with this, our little classroom here of all these wonderful photographs. Number 12 is
Yeah. Yeah.
this
Well,
one haunts me a little bit.
well, I was working like the design director of Management Today. He came from Basel. He was a German, but he came from Basel.
Uh-huh.
I say he was German. I think he was German. But he could have. He was Swiss. He worked in Switzerland on Droop magazine, and he came to London and worked on Management Today. He never came on any photo. I would just present my photographs to him as a fait accompli, really, I must admit. This was an assignment he gave me to photograph foreign cars entering Britain. These were the early days of mass importation of foreign cars into Britain, really. And I decided, I always tried to think of a different way of shooting things. And I decided to get on top of the car transporters that were delivering them around the country and photograph, part of the car like this one, looking out into the landscape from being on the top level of the transporter. And it worked particularly well, especially in this case. And then I was very fortunate. What do you call luck? You need luck in photography. Is that there's a big aerodrome, a big Second World War aerodrome in Kent called Manston, which is on the horizon there. And they don't use it as a military aerodrome anymore. It's just like, I don't know, it's a big runway, massive runway. That's all I know about it. But they were doing fire practice of an aeroplane caught on fire in the distance.
Yeah.
And that was really lucky that I got those fires of these aeroplanes being in fire practice, being putting the fire out in the aeroplanes. And and that was that. There's a woman walking down the street. I can't see it here. There's a woman walking down that street. I can't see her. Anyway, yeah.
What would you suggest to people who are thinking about photography as a career? What are some little nuggets of advice you can give?
Well, I always stop to the way. I mean, I was excited about myself, as I mentioned earlier. I was excited that I could look at things and do things differently. I
Yeah.
found that out through becoming a professional photographer. Immediately, I'd found out. Well, within a year, I found it out. As I said to you before, I didn't feel I could become one, and I found out that I could become a decent photographer. And I've always stuck all my career to the way I see the world. It's been, I've gone through a very rocky career, It might not appear like that now, where people have not liked what I've done, people have been upset with what I've done, people have rejected what I've done. Some people have liked it, some people have accepted it, but I've had a very rocky road. But I've always stuck to the way I go about things. I've never let myself be eroded by
Yeah.
opinions. I don't let opinions erode the way I do things. I know what I want to do, and I do it. Basically, you can lump it or leave it, and it's worked out to my benefit. That my career is still relatively flourishing, and the work I've done in the past is flourishing in terms of public notoriety or public acceptance now, more so than back then. So I'd say stick to your guns,
Yeah.
stick to the way that you go about things, stick to what you believe in. Don't deviate away. Just stick to what you feel. It's so important. That's the most important thing you could ever do in photography. Don't keep on looking at photographs and trying to follow somebody else. Follow your own way. Believe in your own way. Because it probably could be so different to other people. Inevitably, you are a different person to any other human being in the world.
Right.
So, I mean, you must have a vision somewhere deep inside. It's just
Right.
getting it out, really.
Well, and also just the evolution of who we are as humans and the
Yeah.
way we see the world as we grow up and the different lens, no pun
Mm,
intended, of which we observe our own life
mm,
has to influence our work
mm.
over time. So I want to before we move a little bit into some of your iconic album, is there another project you would like us to examine? There are so many here.
Oh, so many.
We could do Gary. We could do
You can do, I mean, I can take you through whatever you'd like to do. I mean, Gary is my street, of course.
okay.
Stillwater, I mean, there's loads of stuff there. I
I
mean,
know.
it's just one page. You could just Moscow, when I went to Moscow, I know you've highlighted that, Moscow in 1974. R.F. Benson was really interesting. They're all interesting in their own way, and there's also other pages, isn't there? As you
There
know,
it is. And
there's pages of it.
I if well, if you don't want to pick, then I'll pick for us. Is that okay?
Yeah, pick whatever you
Okay.
want.
I definitely want to do Moscow 1974.
Okay.
Okay.
Are people staying with us, or are they bored?
Yeah, we got some students left in the classroom. All right, so I have to start with this one. Um, did you go to Moscow by yourself on this
I
trip?
went with people who lived in the flat that I lived in. We were a set of students, ex-students, I should say,
Okay.
that lived in a flat in London together.
Yeah.
And we all, I think, I mean, one, two, I think there were four, including myself, that went to Moscow on a sort of like a weekend, not a weekend. It was a short trip, like 3 days or 4 days there, in Moscow. And it was only by luck that they were doing the celebrations they were doing,
I
That's a
recall.
building. I start that as number 1 of 14, and I heard a whistle next to me, well, in front of me, when I started photographing that building, and a soldier with a rifle and a dog, a big dog, like an Alsatian dog, was running towards me. he said something, and I had to follow him. He either grabbed me by the coat or whatever, and took me down into the bowels of that building. And I went down a long corridors to meet an officer in a room on his own at the far end of a fairly large room.
Yeah.
And he was sitting behind a desk with his military cap on and his uniform. And he kept demanding for my passport, but I didn't have it because the hotel had my passport. When I was staying, it was an in-tourist hotel. But they let me off. I thought I was going to go to jail or something.
Yeah.
It was really scary, and they let me off. And I smoked in those days, and I gave the soldier a cigarette, and I had a cigarette to steady out my nerves, and they let me go. Yeah. I was arrested 3 or 4 times when I was there in a space of 2 or 3 days.
Yeah. See, okay, so we're gonna move to. It's the woman. Oh, sorry. Okay, this one.
Well, that's the story. Henry Cartier-Bresson, a famous photographer, had photographed in Moscow in 1955 and done a book called Moscow.
Uh-huh.
I tried to take a better photograph than he'd ever taken in all his book, which was probably 100 odd pages. And I think I managed it with this picture by sheer luck again, by sheer working so hard, trying to beat these photographs. And I took that at the Museum of Space Exploration, or the Conquerors of Space. It was a snowy day. It was a wet, slushy day with the snow coming down, and he was sliding down this like angled edifice, of this monument. He was just sliding down with his executive case.
Yeah.
It's a nice picture. A lot of people like that picture.
Oh, it's amazing. Absolutely amazing. And I love the shadows here, the reflection.
Yeah. So, thank you.
Okay, so we're going to do one more off of this, and as soon as I see it, I'll say that's it.
Okay.
I think it's number 9.
Right.
Getting warmer.
I can see which one you're going for. I think I know which one you're going for.
I think this is it. Yes.
Oh, there it is. Yeah, that was I walked up the street as this procession of all these nuclear weapons. It was one of the last, before they started again last year, was it? They were only, back then in 1974 was the last parade of nuclear intercontinental ballistic missiles until I think last year. And this woman had committed some crime. I don't know if she was a pickpocket or what she was. That this policeman admonished her, like really telling her, off for doing something terrible.
That's
she obviously did something like a petty crime she'd committed. Right. And it's a policeman telling her off. Yeah.
And you captured at the right moment. Do you remember this gentleman? Was he friends with her?
I have no idea. Because I was walking up the street where there were lots of people viewing the procession.
Yeah.
On the occasion, and I had no idea. I saw this happening, so I quickly clicked it. Yeah.
And did you know at that time, kind of like the one in the black cab, that you knew, okay, I've got something here, very striking, very.
I did. I was very dismissive of this. The pictures I liked were the man sliding down, which you've chosen, and were the people in front of looking at that museum exhibition with the clouds and things about 5 earlier from this shot here.
No, I just love that. It really, it's got a very aggressive feel to it, obviously. So for everyone at home or in the classroom watching and looking at these wonderful images, you can go on to Brian's website and check out more. What we're going to do is, before we talk about the Kickstarter campaign, we're just going to talk real quickly about some of your work for album covers.
Yeah.
You have done quite an extensive amount of work with some well-known, universally well-known artists. Here we have Brian May, Brian Eno. You and I were talking about Mr. Eno a little bit before. When was this shot?
Ooh, good question. Good question. It was in the 80s.
Yeah.
I think towards the end of the 80s, actually. I think it was. I mean, I can tell you, I'll just get the book Pop will tell me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you listen to Brian Eno's work?
I do, yeah. I do.
So,
Yeah, you just asked me a question. Oh, there we go. It was year 1990.
okay.
Yeah, carry on.
So I just saw an interview recently with Brian Eno 2 nights ago.
Right.
And when I was watching it, I was thinking, "Oh, I have a question for Brian Griffin when I speak with him." So here's my question. From
Okay.
what you know of Brian Eno, either as a person, as an artist, what have you, how is your work similar to his work in any fashion? I know he doesn't take photographs per se like you do, but in creating music, in the work that you do as an artist, how would you say your work is anywhere similar?
That's an interesting question. I never thought about it. I mean, my desire to listen to him
Mhm.
obviously connects with me in some way. I
Yeah.
do listen to what he's doing, and he's done many things. Obviously, from the beginnings with Rockstar Music, right up to the present day, and through his more ambient albums and everything. I get the feeling he's a man that is really explorative in the terms of. I think he's also a real geek. I think he's really into precision. I think he's really precise about everything. He was very, and I think I'm very free with people. If people want things, then I tend to let them do it. If people have ideas, I tend to go along with it, whatever. And when I went to see him, he was in this detached house with grounds around Woodbridge, which is the other side of Ipswich. And I think he lives there now for some reason. And he just let me do it. I just wanted to photograph him. I just created a door where I could go inside his brain, really. It's a double exposure.
Yeah.
Brian, one of my techniques.
It's
Let's talk about it, really. I don't know.
a fabulous shot. So we go from
Which
uh,
is a pretty
Brian Eno to
throwaway. Yeah.
Clash here. Were you a big
That's
Clash
fine. I wasn't a Clash fan.
Okay.
I wasn't a Clash fan. I was for the Radio Times, mid 70s, I think around 75, 76. They frightened me, really. Well, it was the big punk year. It was 76, wasn't it? Was it 76? Can't remember. They frightened me, really. I was a young man then, and they were pretty scary, I felt.
Yeah.
Although they were probably harmless. It was in the Roundhouse. It was a concert venue in London.
Yeah. Yeah. Famous.
And that was the beginning of their career and the beginning of my career. Not a particularly creative image, just very much a picture. You're going now into America. You're going now to D.D. Ramone.
Yeah, I wanted because we talked a little bit off this conversation about American music and your appreciation for it. So you obviously you spoke about Bob Dylan, but did you get into the Ramones? Did you really?
Oh, yeah, I did. Yeah, I did. I was in Baltimore. That was in a big hotel in Baltimore, and was it Baltimore? Was it the Biltmore Hotel?
It says Atlanta, Georgia.
Atlanta, sorry, the Biltmore Hotel, Atlanta. I remember going to this massive hotel, and I've got to find DD in this massive hotel. And I was told the floor he was in, but I think the hotel manager incorrectly gave me the wrong Ramones door. And I went to the door, and then I knocked on the door, and at the door came at the door inside his room. He opened the door, and it was Joey. I was like, so again, a bit scared of Joey. You know, he was like a tall, lanky guy. And Joey said, no, Dee Dee's down there, or something like that. And anyway, Dee Dee came downstairs, as you can see, with his girlfriend.
Yeah.
And he's a lovely man, Dee Dee. Beautiful man. I really enjoyed photographing Dee Dee. That was for a Canadian magazine called Weekend, which still exists apparently in Canada, given away as like a colour supplement in a lot of the newspapers at that time. And I was just doing my tour of America, really.
So I have to ask you this question in doing that shot right there. When you take a photograph of musicians, is the music playing in your head at all, trying to capture the energy and the essence? Or is it you just completely tune out their music and it's like, okay, I've got a skyline, I've got this building.
Yeah. I completely tune out of music.
Okay.
I don't ever think about the album cover or about a record or anything. The music doesn't play in my head, doesn't have any effect on me whatsoever. Okay. It's what I'm confronted with in reality, what's in front of me that I'm interested in. And I'm also interested in the second thing, that is doing a job, if it's a job like this was, that the client really likes what I'm doing. I'm going to do my thing, but I pray and hope that the client likes it.
Let's kind of slowly close the curtains on this conversation with your big Kickstarter campaign.
Right.
What is that all about?
It's called crowdfunding. And crowdfunding is to help artists generate enough money by asking the general public, having the internet at their disposal, or having social networks at their disposal, to generate enough interest in what the artist is doing, that the general public will help in their own small way to fund the project. And I asked the general public to fund Mode, which is on Kickstarter. It's a book about Depeche Mode, about the work I did with them, which was from about 81 to 86. I did 6 albums actually in all, 5 very famous ones and 6 albums. And I've asked the general public to fund this book. It's a beautiful book designed by the people that did another great book, which I still love. Sorry, it's about myself, which is The Black Kingdom, which I brought out in, when was that? During lockdown, about 3 or 4 years ago. And that was the second biography of all my work that I did between 1969 and 1990. And that was funded the same way, and it's going to be designed by the same company that designed my earlier book, The Black Kingdom. So you can find your designer, or your designers. You can find your printers. You have the choice of everything. You are like the boss of your project, so you can make that book exactly how you want to make it, exactly the right paper, everything. Sorry, the right cover, hard or soft or whatever. Go on. Sorry.
With Mode, how far along are you in this campaign? Are you achieving your goal? How much further do you have to go?
I have achieved the basic funding I requested, which was 30,000 English pounds.
Congrats.
And I've reached above that, which is within the space of 2 weeks, which I'm absolutely delighted. So I know this book is now going to happen. It will involve me incredibly. I've got to mail all the books out. I've got to manage the whole process of printing, of designing. I've got to collaborate with so many other people that will be involved, like printers and designers, for instance. And I'm going to have to post it. I have to package it. I have to decide on the cardboard box it fits in. I have to sign every single book. And I also have to put every single person in the book, because that is one of the criteria that I mentioned would actually be a part of this whole production. So people will have their name in the book. I will sign every single book. So I've got a tremendous amount. I've got to box it. I've got to label it. I've got to send it out. I have a friend called Vaughan
Oh,
Unison,
yeah, sure.
who is going to help me through this project. Is going to really support me. He has supported me and supported me for a number of years. He produces all those beautiful posters of mine, and he's going to sit alongside me and go through this arduous process. But we will go through it. We will make it perfect. And we have some magic items that have now come into play on this book. I did a movie, because I told you earlier that I made movies meaning pop videos or ads, between 1990 and 2002. And 2002, 2003. We have had the man who is the costumier and the production designer for Only When I Lose Myself, which was a promo I was called to do for Depeche Mode in 1997. And he did a journal on that experience, on shooting out there, because he costumed everything and he designed the shoot, a lot of the shoot, the sets, whatever. And I was the director of that pop video, and he's produced a journal, and I've got 14 pages of his journal to go through, which a part of it will be a man that was there at the time it was made, who was part of the crew.
Got it.
In the book, which will be some magic thing which I didn't know existed. I mean, that is like 18 years ago, 17, 18 years ago. But now I've found it, and it's going to be in the book in almost its entirety.
Fantastic.
Which is a fantastic thing to happen.
So for our fans out there who love Depeche Mode, and I know as we were talking earlier, like just this ravenous, right? And this ravenous love and this voracious appetite for this band. In working with them, what struck you about them as just people?
I like to think, as people, they respected fellow artists.
Okay.
They always left me to get on with my thing. They tended to have minimum impact on anything I did with them. Apart from maybe, initiating an idea that we developed together or whatever.
Yeah.
They were great people to work with. Great people. I just went off and did the album covers. I just did whatever I fancied doing with the subject matter they agreed upon initially. Obviously, they were just so good at letting me get on with things. I mean, Anton now, who is mostly involved with them, Anton Corbett, must find it wonderful to work with a band that respects a fellow artist to just do his thing. And that's what you did with me.
And at the time, from 81 to 86, you said?
Absolutely.
Did you get a sense of, I mean, they were starting to obviously become and evolve into, these well-known musicians. Did you get a sense at that time, okay, this band is going to kind of take over the world?
No, not no way. I just adopted each project I was involved with as an opportunity for me to do the best photography I possibly could in the situation, with the idea I was confronted with. Especially the album covers I'm talking about, of course.
Yeah, right. And then tell us a little bit about your connection to, okay, so this is the one that a lot of people are familiar with. And your connection to the working man, the connection to growing, the understanding of the Black country, was that all kind of pre-planned in these images here?
I think Depeche Mode also helped towards that. They realized what my work was about. I think they were clever enough, especially Daniel Miller, who was their manager at the time,
Yeah.
really used, I don't know, what I was really interested in to make their covers. And it worked out really well, because the images are a little bit Soviet, especially the early ones. So the images could be on album covers in all the shops of the Soviet Union, which was very helpful for Depeche Mode, where a lot of other bands didn't do album covers that were appropriate, can we say, to sit in the front of shops in the Soviet Union. But these ones.
I love this because the little caption says, "I will never forget Daniel Miller's face when he saw these images for the first time on my light box."
Yeah. He was just like a light bulb. He was glowing like a light bulb. And I can understand it. A broken frame, excuse me for being rather boastful, but it's probably one of the most famous photographs in the world today, really. Probably is. I know that's hard to say because I know.
But I do want to ask you, so here we go, the world's best photographs, 1980, 1990. So I do have to ask you that very simple but maybe hard question. If that is true to you and to a lot of people, how does that make you feel? That you clicked and worked on one of the most historical, iconic images in art.
Well, I can say that when you click,
Yeah,
as you had to, and you had Polaroids in those days to see what you were going to click in your back of your camera, you are absolutely filled with so much energy that goes all through your body, just explodes within you internally.
yeah.
And that's when we're talking about religiosity or whatever, religion, whatever. Something makes this happen. You think, I don't know if I control the situation, maybe I did, or maybe I was just producing something that would, like a vessel, I was just a vessel, just like a tube, just ran down the tube and came out into the world. Did somebody determine all these things for me? I can't believe it. I just cannot believe that I actually did a lot of the things I did do. I cannot believe it. I'm so blown away myself with my own work.
Forgive me for asking this question.
What?
In my research of you, doing my homework, I did not see anywhere that. Were you ever a teacher of a photography class?
No. At times I applied to universities
Okay.
for teaching jobs, but they didn't accept me. They didn't want me.
Oh.
But having said that, I have got a claim. Obviously I'm a professor and a doctor, but apart from that, they didn't want me. I don't think they wanted me around. They didn't want this bundle of bloody energy, every day in their departments. It would drive them crazy. They don't want to know. They just want to laze up on a lot of things. They don't. I don't know. They're going to be horrible. No.
So let's go to the Bunnyman real quickly. The tungsten lights were switched on. The magic hour was happening as the daylight faded. However, it was impossible to get the band out of the local pub, so we missed it.
Very true. I was really annoyed with them. That was the band I fell in love with. This band, I did fall in love with them.
I love that caption.
But it's true, that caption. Because I wanted the daylight and my lights to combine together into a photograph.
In a positive way, what was the difference of working with Depeche Mode versus Echo and the Bunnymen?
Well, Echo and the Bunnymen became my friends.
Mm-hmm.
I thought I was like the fifth Bunnyman,
Yeah.
Whilst with Depeche Mode, I had a disconnection with them both, apart from meeting them in the studio,
Yeah,
their recording studio. I never got to know them as people, really.
got it.
Just got to know them as clever men or musicians or whatever you might want to say. But while with the Bunnymen, I felt I was so near to them. You know, I was like part of them. And of course, I was disappointed once again because the Bunnymen left me as well, as you probably know. We work with the same photographer, Anton Corbett.
Right, right.
Look, I lost both Echo and the Bunnymen and Depeche Mode to Anton. He's great, Anton. I'm nothing
Yeah,
against him.
yeah, yeah.
But I lost both of them, you know.
I do have to ask you about this gentleman.
It's very sad, isn't it?
Yeah. So what was he like?
He was a very, very delicate, sensitive, but also extremely naughty man. He was a
Naughty.
very naughty man, but very naughty in a nice way, nothing criminal or anything
Yeah,
like that, but
yeah.
just like naughty. But he was also a very gentle and sensitive and quiet man as well.
And the fact that you say quiet is, to me, obviously a contrast to his drumming.
Oh yeah,
I mean, it's
incredible
smooth
drummer.
and slick, and but his drumming, the pounding,
Oh, incredible.
uh, the natural organic pounding. I got a sense that, and then this one prior to shoot, we see the band with tungsten lighting that we would later use for the album cover photograph. So, how long did this shot take?
Everyone was freezing to
Yeah,
death. It was on top of a small hill, a very cold evening.
yeah,
People were like, I mean, another cold evening because they went to Iceland as well and had a super cold evening. Well, it wasn't evening, was it? It was during the day. It was super cold. It was like evening all day in Iceland. But yeah, really, really cold. They were only young boys then. I mean, how old were
yeah.
they? Like 17,
Yeah,
18?
I don't even think in their 20s. Yeah,
I
someone
don't
can
think,
correct us.
yeah, someone could correct us. They seem terribly young to me.
Do people go to these sites and say, "Hey, Brian, take a look at this image"?
The only site I know that people visit is the Steelworks, where you've got
Okay,
some great reward of
okay,
that album cover. I know people have been there because it's on the internet.
yeah.
You know, fans do go there, but the other places they must do, but I haven't seen it that they have.
So, kind of like the Brian Eno question, which one of the Bunnymen do you relate to the most or connect with, or
Well, the
reminds
only Bunyan I'm distantly close to is Les Patterson,
you?
who is
Okay,
the bass guitarist down on the bottom left,
yeah,
and Will Sargent, who is the lead guitarist, who I think is incredibly creative
yeah,
as well. Incredibly creative guitarist. We did an album together. Not an album. I was just messing around and we recorded it in Liverpool of guitar. I played a guitar and he did. I can't play a guitar, by the way, but he made me sound good. Yeah, I suppose Mac, you know, the
yeah,
singer, Ian
yeah.
McCulloch, he wrote the introduction to a book I did in 86 called Open. He wrote the introduction to it. And I said, will you write the introduction to this book, Mac? And he said, and he looked up into the sky. It was
Yeah.
a clear night, and there were all stars in the sky. It was a clear, no clouds. And he looked up at the clouds and he went, a sky more silver than black.
Oh,
And that's all he said. And I put that in the book. What a great thing to say.
yeah.
I remembered it and put it down. Oh, it's only 2 lines anyway. A sky more silver than black.
Incredible. I'm
He's
loving.
just a great artist. Sorry.
I'm loving and appreciating all these little narratives that you're sharing. We're going to wrap this up in just a couple minutes. Now, I believe this album, Heaven Up Here, just had an anniversary.
That's right.
Yeah. So give us a little background on this glorious shot.
Yeah, a famous studio which still exists is called Rockfield. And I think it's in Monmouthshire. I'm not dead certain because I haven't been down there for many years. It's near Wales anyway. And the nearest coast near to Rockfield that we knew about was a coast near Barry Island, called, well, Porthcawl and Barry Island, in that sort of area. And the record company, Rob Dickens of Corova Records, asked me to get loads of seagulls, and get the Bunnymen photographed with seagulls.
Yeah.
So we got a lot of pieces of fish in that, in plastic bags, stomped the place out. Tons of it. We had a man with an Arab headdress on, ran across the beach in front of the Bunnymen and chopped all these bits of internal organs or pieces of fish on the beach and waited for the seagulls to come down. They wouldn't come down anywhere near the band. They were scared of the band. They didn't come, and they were distant in front of the band. So I couldn't get the seagulls going over the top and flying around them. And so I did this, and there were silhouettes of the Bunnymen with distant seagulls. When I took that to the record company, they went berserk. You photograph
in a good way, right?
Not in a necessarily a good way. You've ignored what we wanted you to do, which was the seagulls and the Bunnymen. We want to see what the Bunnymen look like. Mac is beautiful, remember?
Right.
We want to see what it looks like, and we want to see the gulls flying around the top of Mac or whatever. But then they seem to grow and like it. I mean, if you can imagine, their band was silhouetted, and they liked it, and they produced one of the album. Singles was the gulls, or the posters about the album were just close-ups of the gulls flying around, which obviously I photographed as well as the band.
You know what I love about this image is there's so many aspects to it, but I don't know. It definitely, I mean, obviously heaven up here, the religious undertone, but them kind of, I don't know, the walking on the water symbol.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
Wow.
Okay.
I've always wanted to know what, to me, it was a simple picture. I couldn't. And then it got so famous,
Yeah.
Why is it so? Why does everyone like it? I didn't know why everyone liked it. No idea at all. I didn't think they would. It was a simple shot,
Yeah, in these shots with the Bunnymen, where is it? Oh, this one.
You're obviously a Bunnymen fan.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of a lot of the artists that you've worked with. This just, I mean, it looks very frigid, but this just looks like a great shoot.
We nearly all died on that shoot. We all jumped in a long black Peugeot estate that could house the four of them, me and my assistants, and it was a 7-seater, or easy 7 seats. And I remember going to like a road junction and going over the road junction, and a big truck just missed us. Really fractions, horns blasting, and just a big Arctic truck just missed us, writing my car off, with the Bunnymen. We nearly all died together, me and the Bunnymen. Yeah.
That would have been a very unique story there. I'm going to close this out if you don't mind.
No mind, no.
Okay. And I'm going to get you on screen here. There we are. Okay. Let's see. I just want to read a couple comments here. Eleanor says, I'm also a wannabe photographer. Michael Prince says, it's a beautiful book. Tomas says, this is awesome. Glad you're enjoying it. And then Eleanor says this name, Ramon Zabalza Ramos.
Wow.
And then Tina says, hey, Brian, really fun listen, always some new things. Beso from Tbilisi says hi, and I am sending hugs. Hope we see each other in Arlen.
Who was that?
Tina Shellhorn.
Oh, yeah, she's a great mate out of Cologne. Yeah, one of my dear friends. Go back a long time.
Eva says, thank you so much. Brilliant. Okay, so we're going to end with what's coming down the line after this mode collection. Do you have something else in the works?
Well, we didn't touch on that. Although you have it's a book called Gary. I'm going to put Gary out there next year to crowdfund.
Okay.
And that's my next big project. But also I'm working, because I've become the ambassador of the Swiss watch, as you know, as most people know. I'm going over to do a book of their company in Switzerland next week, no, week after next.
You're a busy man.
I am, yeah. I love it. I love every minute of my life. I'm so happy. I hope I live a long time.
Well, you've done some extraordinary work, and as far as living for a long time, I have no doubt, because you're doing what you love. Your images will endure the test of time. This has been an incredible conversation, and being a teacher myself for many years of elementary students, it has been great being a student and learning about your work. And again, can you remind everyone about, real quickly, the Kickstarter? How can they find that to help fund it?
Please go on Kickstarter, which is Kick, Kickstarter in English, Kickstarter, and put Brian Griffin Mode, MODE.
Okay.
Brian Griffin Mode, and it'll pull up on your computer or your smartphone or your tablet. You'll see Mode, and then you just pledge whatever you'd like to pledge, whether it's £1, £10, £50, £500, you just, or 30 or 40 or whatever, just pledge something towards the book. It would really help us. Thank you very much for listening to me dribble and I don't know.
Not at all. Not at all.
Not all the time about my work. Thank you for listening.
Absolutely. And thank you to our participants so much for tuning in. My name is W.A.K. William, host of the High Art on the Edge page. I connect with artists all over the world, photographers, musicians, painters, writers, you name it, and have these amazing conversations to learn not so much, about their craft, but who they are as people. And I got a great sense of who you are today, Brian. So thank you for your time, and best of luck and success to you. Take care, everyone. Keep paying attention to high art. It's always right in front of your eyes. Take care. Ciao.